Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Rain Pryor, and today my guest is Pat Gawaziuk, and we are going to be talking about the history of Ukrainian immigration to the Neepawa area. So welcome, Pat.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope I can answer some of the questions you may have for me.
I'm sure you can, and when I think about talking about the history of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in the area, you were the first name that really comes to mind for me because I know how involved you are. So why don't you just give us a bit of information on your connection to the Ukrainian community in the area?
Well, for starters, myself, my husband, we're second generation Canadian Ukrainians. Our grandparents came, our parents were born here, so we're second generation. Our grandparents came in the turn of the century, and I'll probably touch on that later on.
Okay.
But when we talk about Ukrainian immigration, what comes to mind, first of all, is the two waves between 1891 and 1914, and then, of course, post-Second World War.
Right, of course.
However, doing a little bit of research, that's why I have to have a cheat paper here, so I get these dates ready. So, but apparently, as early as 1784, there's evidence of fur traders that were in Russian Alaska that were from Ternopil. Now, Ternopil is a city as well as a province in western Ukraine, and at that time, Alaska did belong to
it was Russian,
Russia.
Right?
It was, yes. And then again in 1871, a little later, there's evidence that some fur traders came along with people also to Alaska. And then in 1870, a few Ukrainians came. It seems that the numbers aren't, I guess they were negligible,
right,
like compared to what later came, and they came along with Mennonite families to southern Manitoba.
Okay.
Because a lot of the Mennonites had come from the Russian
kind of same area
too. Yeah. So they had friends or family, and also some Ukrainian soldiers were brought in by Wattwell and de Meuron's Swiss army to fight the American War of 1812.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So they were kind of what we call, was that Upper Canada, Lower Canada?
Right, yeah.
Kind of, it wasn't really
Well, it was before it was Canada, really.
No,
so,
it wasn't. It wasn't Ontario as we know it. So then later in 1817, Lord Selkirk took a couple of soldiers west to defend the Red River settlement, and he was so pleased with them, or wanted to reward them somehow. So he actually gave them 100 acres of land around Point Douglas, just outside of Winnipeg.
Right.
So that was, those were trickles of Ukrainians.
But it means it went back a lot further than we imagined.
Yes, actually, that's something that I found quite interesting myself.
Yeah.
And so then it wasn't really till 1891 that we really hear about the real exodus.
That was the wave, the first
wave.
That
was the real wave. That's when it started. And there was two men, actually. Their name was Wasyl Ilinyak and Ivan Pilepio. And they had come to Manitoba from Ukraine. Ultimately, one of them went to Alberta. Like, there's also a big settlement in Alberta. So thus began the first wave. So by 1914, around 170,000 to 180 had arrived. The Minister of Interior, I guess they called him, of the Liberal government at the time, Clifford Sifton, was an agent set to populate Western Canada.
So those numbers are for all of Canada, but it mostly came to Western Canada.
Yeah, it's all of Canada. It wasn't just for Manitoba.
Yeah.
As an aside, the government of the day was not too excited about these so-called Slavic people coming. Now, you can understand their concern. Like, I mean, these weren't ladies in dressed for an afternoon tea. They were, in rough, the language, the Slavic language is nothing that these people had heard. I could almost understand, so they said, oh, no, we just got to hold back on this.
Well, their familiarity, I guess, would be with basically English and French.
Right. So, like they were used to that. And of course, what trickles in sometime, this terrible thing that we still live with today, a little bit of people that are in power, sometime unfortunately,
to maintain the status quo.
Yeah, at that time. So so it was a combination of efforts, and anyways, Mr. Sifton was not going to give up on this. And I mean, their alphabet is Cyrillic, like it's wiggles that you
can read and I cannot. So.
Yeah, actually. So the mode of dress and, anyways, Mr. Sifton finally put his foot down on this, and I quote him here. And because these people came from, agricultural background. So this is what Mr. Sifton said to set the government of the day straight. And away he went to Ukraine. So this is what he said. I think a stalwart peasant in a sheepskin coat, born to the soil, whose forefathers have been farmers for 10 generations, with a stout wife and 10 children, is good quality. Now, he would have got into big trouble if he'd said that today, but. So away he went. So of course, yes, farmers they were, like Ukraine has always been known as a breadbasket of Europe.
Right, yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you refer to the flag, this is there. You see, it's yellow on the bottom, which signifies the breadbasket stuff, and the blue sky.
Blue sky. Yeah.
So they really were agrarian people,
right? And
he felt that this is what we needed to populate and to develop Western Canada. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, so what happened was these folks, here they were, they came, and by that time, a lot of Manitoba, southern Manitoba, I should say, was settled by the Scottish, the Mennonite, those that came first. So there wasn't that seemingly, it seemed that there wasn't as much land available, or they just didn't bother to hang around to find out. So a lot of them were sent to northern Manitoba, to western Manitoba, and that didn't matter. The Ukrainians were happy to be here because when they were under the Tsarist rule, so to speak, they had to give a lot back to the government. Like if they had a load of wood, they had to give a certain part to that. So that's why a lot of people came, because they were tired of that kind of stuff. So imagine they came here for $10. They could get 160 acres.
Imagine doing that today.
Yeah, I don't know what 160. I should have checked this out. What's 160 acres in hectares? Well, you know what? People watching it can check it out.
Well, you know what? We'll put it on screen. We'll figure it out.
You figure it out. They'll figure it out on Google. Anyways, they went up north. Well, there was all this wooded area, and you know what? Every stick was theirs. They didn't have to give anything to anybody. They paid their $10, and they got 160 acres of wooded area. What they didn't know in some cases was that underneath all that lovely wood, there was stone upon stone. It wasn't the
rich soil.
I mean, it was virgin soil, all right, but it wasn't, and it was healthy soil, but it wasn't like in other parts of Manitoba where it was stone upon stone. And I think a lot of them have picked stones to this very day. Mind you, you got better equipment to do it.
I'm pretty sure when I was on the farm, we were still picking stones.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now look at this. Anyways, also, they didn't know that there would be hordes of mosquitoes. Now, mosquitoes came free. As a matter of fact, if you're aware of the fact that there's in the Interlake area, there's a town named Komarno. Actually, that is the absolute Ukrainian word, which means mosquito infested. And there is, of course, there is that a mascot? No.
It explains. It's like a roadside
it's
monument.
Huge. It's huge. Like
huge mosquito.
It would probably take up half of
that
this room.
explains why they have mosquito.
That's right.
As their roadside attraction.
And that was it was unreal. And I mean, it was like that all over in Manitoba.
Still sometimes is.
Yeah. So, anyways, now so back to the first wave. In this area, I guess.
Yeah.
Between 1898 and 1900, 12 families came to Mountain Road. Now, these people traveled. In many cases, they took their brother and family, and it wasn't just. Sometimes it was just one person that came, or two, but sometimes they traveled all together. Like there was several families that traveled, that got themselves from Ukraine to Germany to get on. I mean, it was
and they came as like one unit.
It was a very labor-intensive journey, if you can imagine. Like, and some of them came like in the spring, and with the ocean. These weren't superb ocean liners, of course.
No, and these are people who came from a landlocked kind of area.
Right, so they weren't really used to that. So anyways, they came, and of course they were ravaged by diseases, scarlet fever. Like, it was nothing for have 12 families living in a straw plastered, some kind of hovel. Yeah. Like, talk about, we need to have a bedroom for each kid. I think they were, but then that's what they did. They were glad to be free. They were glad to be their own sort of
masters of their own fate.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say their own boss. Or, sort of that thing. Anyway, when they were up around Mountain Road, I hear that like the men had to go work to subsidize or to get this, because they got their 160 acres, but there was a little catch to that.
Okay.
Within so many years, they had to clear so much of that land. They had to put up a building of some sort.
Okay.
Within so many years, and then they had to have so much stock within so many years.
Because they wanted people who were going to have a homestead and settle.
Right, and that they were going to be, they're just not going to sit there on their duff like they were expected to, because they were invited here to kind of break up, to settle the place. So they were expected to have performance, and maybe there was some that didn't live up to it, and so I don't know what the repercussions there was, but they were expected to make some showing, and step by step.
And so Mountain Road is just a little ways north of Neepawa here,
right?
Close to where I grew up, actually, because I grew up in Eden, so that's right up.
Bernie and Eden.
Yeah, right up there. Okay. So about 10-15 minutes away.
Right. Yeah. So, anyways, the men went on to find work, maybe with some more established farmers that were in the area, or they went into the woods to cut cordwood.
Right.
And a cord of wood is a 8 by 4 by 4 load.
Right.
So one man is said to have cut 162 cords by axe, because for some strange reason,
by axe.
Yeah, for some strange reason, if you were just a one man. You couldn't have privy to some type of saw or that wasn't around or whatever, I don't know. But anyways, and with those 162 cords, he got $40 to $50 for the winter.
Right.
So that could have been enough to maybe buy a cow or an oxen.
I mean, if $10 gets you 160 acres, I can imagine what 40 or 50 would.
Yes, probably to get an oxen. That's what they started with, and you don't hear much about horses till a little later.
Right.
So that's how they eked out an existence. And but what was very important to these people, faith. Mm-hmm. Faith in God was very important. So first thing, they talked about building a church. And so you will notice, when you go through some history books, you'll notice, why is there a church about every 2 miles? Well, they built churches, and then latterly schools, and halls where they could get together and do their drama and stuff. Yeah. But why they were built so close together was it's as far as the horse could take you.
Right.
Or you could walk.
Or you could walk, yeah,
or
exactly.
You could walk, yes. So in 1903, there was then of course, Mount Road's actually 25 miles from Neepawa.
Yeah.
So they had to walk or go with their oxen or whatever. So then we just need some store here so that it would be more convenient to get the basics, your sugar, salt.
Exactly. Yeah.
So actually in Mountain Road, if you know what Mountain Road looks like, at one point there was 4 stores right at the crossroads. There was one in each corner.
Mountain Road's down to a couple of buildings now, I think. Yeah.
And I'm not sure that they're all inhabited.
Yeah. There is still at least one at the corner, though.
Right. So that's, once they had a store there, then of course it was maybe walking 2 miles versus 25.
Huge
so
difference.
The women could go and get their, and of course they had everything there that you needed. As a matter of fact, and of course, language was a big problem with but these I think these stores were owned by the Ukrainians that were there. But as an aside, a little humor, the men were more inclined to pick up the English language because a lot of them worked with English farmers.
Right.
Whereas the women, well, they were at home looking after the kids and cleaning out a bit of bush for a garden. But so language was a big problem. The men did have the upper edge on it, but still sometimes it didn't quite work. I've been told the story of a wife sent a husband to the store. It wouldn't be in Mount Road because they'd be Ukrainian, but maybe it was in Neepawa before the stores, to buy what we call a colander. You know what a colander is? Like a sieve. So, well, he knew it wasn't Ukrainian. Well, it's no use telling the Anglo-Saxon storekeeper in Ukrainian. So he goes in there and he shows him this. So the man thinks, oh, it's a bowl. Mm-hmm. Well, he shows him a bowl, some pottery type heavy bowl. No, not a bowl. Well, then he shows him a pot. It's not a pot. So, they're both getting frustrated, obviously, because this is going no place. So finally, the Ukrainian says, I want water go, macaroni stop. That worked. So, they communicate, they learn to communicate. But that's an age-old story that apparently it's not a legend, it happened. And there was many more like that. Yeah. But people, how, I guess, they say smile is the language of kindness and whatever, but their verbal stuff, it took some doings.
And certainly the languages aren't close together, so it would have taken...
No. So, anyways, to our parents, Ernie's paternal parents.
That's your husband.
My husband, yes. My husband, my friend, my caregiver. His paternal grandparents came in 1901 and settled it just north of Glenella.
Okay.
They didn't live there that long, maybe 14 years or so. Actually, he has his dad was born there. They did come with one boy from Ukraine, but it wasn't Ernie's dad. Ernie's dad was born here in Canada. He was a little older, and they did have they had a daughter, and she died, and she's buried out there. Now I don't know if that had something to do with their decision to move, or they knew somebody in Dauphin or whatever, but they moved north of Dauphin probably 14, 15 years after they settled there.
Right.
And that was Ernie's people. Now, my mom's parents came in 1902 straight to Dauphin. See, there was railroad by then, so they did come, to Halifax and to down the road with by train. Took them days upon days.
But it's still,
So my mom's parents came. They came with a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. Now, can you imagine? No, I can't.
I can't actually.
No, a 6-month-old on this ship.
And with a 2-year-old in hand as well.
And a 2-year-old. It was, we don't know. We can't imagine. So they settled north of Dauphin.
Right.
Now my mom used to tell me the story that her dad, like north of Dauphin, so Dauphin's an hour and a half from here.
Right.
Now where they settled was around Pine River area.
Okay, so nearby.
Well, it's probably another hour.
Another hour? Okay.
Yeah, it's
maybe it's just shorter the way I drive.
Maybe it's the speed you drive. We won't tell anybody.
No.
Oh, dear,
it's on camera now.
Oh dear. Well, it's about another hour north of Dauphin.
Yeah.
He used to come to Neepawa along with and work in the farms. See, because Neepawa was established earlier.
Yeah, like Neepawa was 1883, I think was.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather used to come here for harvest. And then he'd walk home. Yes, there was a railroad going north, but I mean that's a cost factor. So he'd walk home and he'd bring back a bag of sugar or flour and a basket, would you believe, a basket of Concord grapes because they came from Ontario.
Yep.
Like my mom said, as a kid, that they looked forward to their dad coming home because he'd bring home. And even when my mom lived with us, well, she passed away in '86. She always had a memory of Concord grapes because that's what her dad used to bring for her.
And when we say he's walking, like 2.5 hours, that's driving at today's speeds.
Right.
Walking that is a tremendous distance.
Yes, and carrying this.
And carrying.
Carrying this thing. So, like I said before, now my paternal grandparents, my dad's, his grandfather and grandmother came, and they came. The grandfather, my dad's dad, was a young man then. He was 23 or so. So they came also to but they came to the Sandy Lake area, just west of here.
Right.
They came, and there was quite a few families that came. As a matter of fact, from that village. And as a matter of fact, the lady that ended up being my grandmother, that family, she was a young girl too, that family came along with them. And they settled in the Sand Lake area. However, the great-grandparents, so of course, maybe because my grandfather had vested interest in the area, he stayed in Sandy Lake, and the great grandparents,
Right.
moved on to Saskatchewan,
Okay.
to the Wishart area,
Okay.
and they settled there with their other 4 sons. Matter of fact, probably, I don't know, is it 12, 14 years ago, we had a family reunion, and we got to see exactly where my great-grandparents, I always knew they were buried there someplace, but never knew the exact area, and they settled there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how they anyway, so that was kind of the settlement. But so all this sounded great. They got their 160 acres of land. They're busy working. You know, the men have to go out and work, like I said, and the kids, you know, I mean, a span of 10 years or whatever has gone by. So some of the girls, they were able to, you know, help out with the farming, and things were getting to look good, except one thing happened, and the First World War broke out.
Yeah.
Now, you know, Ukraine, well, it's familiar, you know, because they're surrounded by everybody. They've always been tugged at. It's kind of like, you know, when you have a cake or a piece of pie, you take one sliver. Well, it's crooked. You have to straighten it out.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, half of the pie is gone or half of the cake. So I don't know if that's kind of the analogy I use. But yes, World War I broke out, and at that time, Ukraine was really it was kind of divided. The western part, the more chunk of the western part, was under the Hungarian-Austrian Empire.
Right.
Now, the eastern part was under the Russian Empire. So consequently, like if you speak to some of the people even today that still have, you know, some people maybe even have their grandparents or great-grandparents' passport. And I know even my parents, when my parents would say, oh, well, you know, Mom and Dad came from Austria. Well, it wasn't from Austria because Austria occupied Ukraine. They were not Austrians, they were Ukrainian. But their passport said Austria.
And that caused problems.
Oh, big problems.
Yeah.
Because during the First World War, Austria was deemed an enemy alien.
Yeah.
And Russia and Britain, therefore Canada, were allies.
Yeah.
So the government, the Canadian government, oh my goodness, we got all these aliens here.
All these Austrians.
These Austrians here, you know, they're enemies. You know, no questions asked. They just went to their house. You come with me.
Yeah.
And because of their let's see your passport.
Yeah.
It says Austria. You are an enemy. I mean, they were busy keeping soul and body together. They weren't an enemy to anybody.
No.
But anyways, away they went to the internment camps, and goodness knows there was lots. Well, there was one in Brandon. There was. They were all over the place. They were in Alberta. I think there was some.
And this is a history I didn't know.
Yeah,
this is really...
well, it's a little dark spot in Canadian history. However, it wasn't too many years ago that the Canadian government, did a big apology and gave the communities or the Ukrainian, like Congress or, you know, those kind of societies, they gave them a package of money, besides an apology.
Yeah.
They gave him a package of money that you could either build some memorial or some plaque. There's in Brandon. There's a plaque on that, on the fairgrounds. You know, there's like that's where they were housed there. So for an apology, because you know, like there again, you know. Whether it wasn't researched or this was a thing to do or what happened there, but it happened.
Yeah.
like a dark area.
Yeah.
And you know, there's other nationalities and races.
It's
that
certainly happened
that
again later.
It's happened. It's happened. It's happening, unfortunately. But this is what happened to the Ukrainians. So they had a tough time again. And then by the time they grappled themselves out of that, well, then guess what? There was a depression. So of course, again, everybody suffered with that again. But anyways, with their unshakable faith in God and their determination, stubborn Ukrainians.
You're allowed to say that.
Am I allowed to say that?
You're allowed to say that.
Yeah, I can say that. I can't say that about anybody else, but you needed to have that.
Yeah.
You know, they would have never survived. I mean, they would have. So they have put their mark. The Ukrainians have certainly put their mark on the country of Canada, as we know. I mean, there's in government, there's doctors and you name it, every facet of professionalism, and the tapestry of you know, that they've owned, the culture, the colorful culture, the food. And this is another aside, and some of the older people that were, you know, you'd have to be probably 80 years old to appreciate this, but you know, like as far as food, as far as fixing, like pierogies was, you know, a big thing. Yeah. And actually, the folks not of Ukrainian heritage, that was a big joke. Like, that's all they eat is these pierogies. So of course, the poor Ukrainians, they got a real, you know, a bad self-image about that. So I know a lady, she's passed away already, but I know a lady in Neepawa told me that, you know, I mean, everybody had these 10 kids that they were talking about. So you'd put this bowl like this on the table. Well, next thing you know, the Watkins salesman's coming down the road, so they would hide that into the oven or the stove or under the bed or something, because they were criticized, they were laughed at. So fast forward 80 years.
It's a staple food here now.
Exactly.
For everybody.
I have had people tell me that, well, I don't like going to a wedding that's not done catered by Ukrainians, because there won't be any cabbage rolls, there won't be any pierogies. I mean, that would go for the Polish too. I mean, all Slavic people suffered. You know, underneath this, it wasn't just the Ukrainians. Underneath this kind of mentality, I guess it was. But yeah, it's a staple food. Like, people go nuts over pierogies. To tell you the honest truth, like myself, I mean, yeah, what's so exciting about it? But I guess you put a little bacon on there and a few fried onions, butter. Mwah. What is it? What's the word in French? Pièce de résistance.
Oh, pièce de résistance.
Yeah, so see, my French is not good. I do have a French son-in-law, but I've never really honed totally this. But yeah, it's very, very part of how it's already melded into like an integral part of this.
And it has been for a while, because, you know, from my experience, I grew up in this area. Right. I grew up in the Eden area, which is, 10 minutes away. First of all, I would have thought the pierogies and cabbage rolls were Manitoba food, because they were such a staple when I was growing up.
It's good to hear your spin on it.
Yeah, well, it's a different perspective on growing up in this community, which has this Ukrainian influence so embedded in it, that I thought it was just part of this community. And also, and I think I mentioned this to you before, that when I was in school, we had 2 languages we could choose from, French or Ukrainian.
Okay.
And in my elementary school, there was a Ukrainian class.
Right.
And that's just how influential the Ukrainian immigration has been to this area.
Right. So now that was the first and second wave. Now, sort of, kinda, there was the third wave.
Kind of a third wave, yeah.
Sort of, kind of, in this area. And that's because High Life in 2008 also had an agent go to.
Yeah, and that's one thing we didn't mention, really, was when during, I think, the first wave, that agent, they were recruiting directly from Ukraine.
Right.
They were putting these advertisements out.
Yes, yeah, there's an ad there
Yeah.
someplace. I think you might have it on
Yeah, we'll show it.
We'll dig it out when my
Yeah.
my family did his family history book, and there's actually the ad there. And also, yes, it was just like advertising everything else. Some people didn't stay just because they all came.
Right.
They didn't stay, and of course, I think the agent did sort of tell people that this is next to milk and honey here, which was.
Didn't mention the mosquitoes.
He didn't mention mosquitoes. He didn't mention the stones. He didn't mention much of anything because he was interested in getting them here.
So they didn't just choose Manitoba. They were directly recruited to come here.
To Canada, yes. And it wasn't. It was. There was some false advertising. It kind of worked its way in, and some of them got in here, and this isn't for me. And even some people in my family. My grandmother's brother had come. He was a young fellow. I don't know what his problem was, but he did not stay.
Yeah.
He did not stay. So, the grandfather, I think he came with 2 other brothers or so, and families, and they stayed. But this young fellow, I don't know, did he have a girlfriend in Ukraine, or I don't know what his problem was, but he went back.
Yeah.
So. And that's the same, like in 2008.
So fast forward now, 2008.
Yeah, to 2008, and there was 46 or so Ukrainians that came here. Some settled in Mendoza, and over a period of time, as they have evolved and fixed up the language part, a lot of them have moved on, and out of those, some went back to Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, the culture shock is still there. I don't care if it was in 1891 or.
Yeah.
I mean, we have more resources now to kind of help you along and kind of say, it's okay, just hang in there.
But some of the challenges would be the same.
The challenges are the same, and you would think that the challenges, some of the challenges are the same, some of them are worse. You must remember that when those people left, they never saw their family again.
Right.
There was no texting or phone or, a letter took months.
Traveled by boat, so
That's right. So there was there were those challenges which we don't have today, but then there's still challenges. It's not easy. When 10 years ago when we took a trip through Europe, Ukraine, and Israel, it was great. The Slavic countries, of course, we could piece together to survive. Be a little different story for a working language.
Yeah.
But we thought many times, okay, now if I had to live here, I mean, we're not going to see their beautiful park, their beautiful museum. Like, I need to work here. Like, Mom, let me go home. And so it's difficult. I mean, I hand it to those people that have come here at any time, whether then or coming now. There's a lot of issues that when you relocate, it's for real.
And one of the reasons, you come top of mind for me when talking about the Ukrainian community is you were really, when the people came in 2008, you were really involved then.
Yes, we were. There would be many times there'd be 4 or 5 people lined up in our kitchen needing whether medical or, and that's waned. But even now we still get a call.
Yeah.
We were so glad, and I've always told them that, they're very appreciative, really. They're appreciative to this day. They call us our Canadian grandparents. But they were so appreciative, are appreciative. And I've always said to them, you know what, don't even mention it. I'm glad that we have the health to help you, and I'm glad that you don't have to go through what our grandparents did.
Yeah.
Because that was not pretty.
No.
So, and I mean, now we have our settlement services. We have,
Right.
I mean, they had something like that in Winnipeg, probably, in I don't know what they called it, but some kind of an immigration hall where they.
Yeah, it'd be very different.
Where they, and they had to.
Yeah.
Where they sort of, I guess you'd say, process them.
Yeah.
But I mean, now we have a personal touch. If you have a problem, I mean, we have immigration centers all over the place.
We have resources available. We have translators available.
Right. So you're not alone. Like, you don't have to.
But it's still a challenge.
Oh, for sure. I mean, within.
Even coming here, where we do have kind of an embedded Ukrainian culture,
right?
It's still not the same as being at home.
Well, no, it isn't, and this is why, in the current situation, we want to be very receiving and very come here, but they're leaving their parents behind, and some of them are aged parents, and some of them don't have anybody else there, and it's not, Ukraine is not from Winnipeg to Regina.
Yeah.
It's half a day away.
Yeah.
So there's all those problems, but I hope somehow that we can help them. There's a beautiful story on CBC about Elkhorn have taken in a couple,
that's
and
about
we'll take some more.
45 minutes from here,
Yes,
I think.
yeah, and to help in the resort area.
Yeah.
And so it comes to mind, the people that came there kind of from, I would say, central Ukraine, more like not really western, but the western Ukraine, and we never did get to visit that area, but it's quite mountainous, the western Ukraine. They have the Carpathian Mountains.
Right, yeah.
And so it brings to mind, I wonder if they think that they feel like they're in the Carpathians. And they're so happy to be here, this couple. And they actually met up with an employee at one of the stores in Erickson that lives about 30 kilometers from where they come. So, like, you always, it's so nice when you're away. Like, I mean, that's what we found when we traveled, that to find somebody that knows, that can connect with you. Like when we were in Israel, we met up with a gentleman that actually went to school in Brandon. And it was like, oh.
It's funny you mention that. I lived in the Philippines for a year.
Okay.
When I was there, one time we were traveling and I ran into someone who was from just south of Winnipeg.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was,
Yeah, we didn't, we got, so after 3.5 months, we wouldn't even, they'd say, oh, you're from Canada, because we had our little maple leaves. So, I mean, that's all we'd say. And then they'd say, well, we're both Canada. We say the middle of Canada. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, I always say the middle part.
What's the point of, and then this gentleman says, well, I lived in Canada. Oh, and where did you live? Well, I I taught he taught at Vincent Massey or something, and I did I said, okay, now we can say a word that we haven't said for a while. We actually are just north of Brandon at Neepawa. Oh, I've been to Riverbend Park, and I did my practice teaching in Fisher Branch. And it was like, you just
that connection.
Crave for that connection. That was 3.5 months. Now these guys are forever. So can you imagine?
But that's, I think, what sets this area apart from a lot of areas of Canada is that there is the potential to run into that person because we have that history of Ukrainian immigration here.
Right.
We have those families that have been here for a long time.
Right.
That maybe can relate in some way to that journey.
Right. So really, the Ukrainians have come a long way. So it comes to mind, I wonder what the early government fathers would say now about these folks in sheepskin clothing.
Interesting thought to leave us on. Thank you for coming and talking to me today.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us.
I hope we shed a light on how it was. And we didn't cover everything because we would be here till tomorrow this time. So we just kind of touched.
We might have you back sometime to talk about some more stories about.
Sure. Well, it was an enjoyable afternoon.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks, and see you guys next time.
Okay.